Hey everyone, it's episode 11 of the Neoncast coming to you after an extended break because of stuff. I had things to do, life and whatnot, and also not too much to talk about. I mean, there was a lot of like small stuff, but not really, I don't know, not really something that I could like build an entire fucking episode around, I guess. I mean, I probably could babble for like an hour about anything, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, like the movies that are coming out later this year continue to get stuff like trickled out from them. Ninja Turtles had a bunch of trailers. It still looks like it's going to be kind of fun, I guess. X-Men Apocalypse still fails to excite me no matter what they kind of throw on screen. They're trying really hard to ape what Marvel's doing, but we're going to get to that in a little bit because this episode is going to be all about Captain America Civil War. Warcraft, also trailers. Also, I don't know what's going to become of that movie. I think it really, really depends on word of mouth, and I do believe that people are going to start seeing it pretty soon. And then we'll see what the buzz is like. I mean, I'm kind of rooting for that movie. I'm really waiting for, it took a long time for them to crack the code with regards to comic book movies. They're still trying to crack that video game movie code. Still not working. We got Assassin's Creed coming out later this year with Michael Fassbender, supposedly like a big time project. That's not really a series that I'm familiar with, intimately acquainted with. Same goes for Warcraft. I mean, I was a big Warcraft 2 fan, not so much World of Warcraft, but it's the same mythology. I'm just worried that it'll have a hard time breaking out of that whole Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones kind of vibe. And The Hobbit sort of fell flat a little trying to recreate that magic of Lord of the Rings. And that's the same universe. So this is going to be doubly difficult. I don't know. Video game movies, they just don't work. I don't know why. I mean, there's plenty of video games I think that could work. It's just a matter of what they do. I don't know. Could Gears of War be a good movie? It's a fun game. I guess it could be like a kind of like a Starship Troopers type movie of running around and shooting things and chainsawing monsters, but I don't know. Like, can you keep that interesting, or are the games that we like are they enjoyable because of the narrative format of a game, which is hard to translate, or is it the same as like books? Because plenty of books that are great are then turned into movies that are great. And I'm a huge book fan. Like, I read a lot of novels, a lot of fiction, a lot of science fiction, especially. And some of that stuff is really like, I read a book, I enjoy the fuck out of it. And I think to myself, this will never work as a movie. It's too complicated. It's too expansive. It's a little hard to take a 1,200-page science fiction novel that's about the future, and it has this elaborate society and history, and a million different things are happening at the same time. So you say, oh, maybe it could work as like a show, kind of Game of Thrones. That's a good example of a book that was like a very convoluted, dense narrative that they kind of simplified a little for like show format. I could spend a whole episode talking about Game of Thrones. The new season has premiered. I've fallen way off the interest. My interest level has fallen like right off the cliff with that show. I'm still watching it for, whatever, shits and giggles. But like I'm a big fan of those books, and I feel like the show is straying further and further away from what I like about the books. I also think the books are straying further and further away from what I like about the books. But that's like a whole discussion for like a whole other episode. But yeah, Warcraft, I don't know. Who knows what's going to become of that. We also had the Doctor Strange teaser, which I also saw, again, play before Civil War. There's not too much going on in it. It's just a little taste of things to come. Inception, upside down cities, weird stuff, outrage about race and casting. But as I said, we're not gonna talk about that kind of stuff on this podcast because I usually complain about that kind of stuff, and I don't want to drag this into like complainy, angry territory. I do that enough elsewhere. It would be nice to focus on the positive. And you know what? I'm going to surprise you this week because of a few comments that I have about Civil War, which sort of play into this whole, I don't know, social justice, diversity angle, but like from a perspective you wouldn't expect from me. So I guess we could just get right into it. So I ran out and saw Civil War when it aired. The Winter Soldier is possibly my favorite Marvel movie. I think my two favorite Marvel movies up to this point were Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, Guardians kind of exists outside of the Marvel shared universe for now. I mean, they kind of tied it in a little bit because it had an Infinity Gem, Infinity Stone. Thanos was in the background. He was kind of like the way the Emperor was in Star Wars, where, you know, in the beginning, like Darth Vader, he was the main villain, but like there was a guy behind the scenes kind of pulling the strings. That's how Thanos functioned in Guardians of the Galaxy. I also thought it was kind of smart to show that Thanos was the type of villain who was also dealing with shit that like the people on Earth didn't even know existed. There's a whole other galaxy. There's other planets having wars on them, and Thanos has his fingers in that as well. Like he's dealing with Loki on Earth, trying to get the stuff that's on Earth, but he also has business that we are so like unaware about. I think that really works to establish Thanos as like this galactic menace and really going to be an appropriate villain for the climax of this, you know, this cycle of Marvel movies. I think phase 3 is going to close out with the Infinity War movies. And then Kevin Feige said phase 4 is going to be almost like it's new, like a new thing. So yeah, Guardians, I really, really adore that movie, and I can't wait for the second one. But yeah, for the Marvel movies that are, you know, that concern the Avengers, essentially, Winter Soldier really hit me the hardest. I felt that it was the strongest in terms of tone, and it had a really good mix of sort of fantastical elements with more worldly elements. I thought it was a really good mix of gritty drama, action, but also that levity and fun that Marvel have sort of captured so well, because I think that really sets the good Marvel movies apart from almost any other comic book movie that's good, apart from maybe the Dark Knight Nolan movies, is that they're fun in the right kind of way. You know, Joel Schumacher famously said about his Batman movies, they're called comic books, not drama books. Now, that quote has become kind of infamous because of what he did with that, which was give everybody, you know, like nipples on their, you know, on their bat suits and make everything super saturated and sort of campy in a really like obnoxious and not good way. Marvel sort of, it's funny because like Marvel took this quote that I often cite like as a joke and almost said like, you know what, they are comic books and not drama books, but let's keep the drama in, but let's make sure it's fun. Let's make sure that when somebody parks their ass in a movie theater seat and pays, you know, however many dollars to see one of our movies, that they leave having like with the feeling that their money was well spent, that they had fun, they were entertained. And I think Winter Soldier was a movie that had a lot of serious elements, a lot of gravitas, a lot of like really gritty, cool action. And it was all within that envelope of fun. It had witty banter. It had funny moments. It had really cool action scenes, but it also had like human drama. It had character development. It had some really good suspense. It was just like it just worked really well. And the Russo brothers, who I'm going to talk a little bit about more at the end, are this revelation. Like Robert Downey Jr., who was like this down on his luck, had problems with drugs. His career was kind of in the toilet. Came along for the Iron Man movies and it catapulted him into becoming, basically the biggest star in Hollywood. And I think that other than him, the other big thing to come out of the Marvel sort of machine is the Russo brothers, who before this made me, and Dupree and a bunch of television. They directed a bunch of like episodes of like Community and a few sitcoms that you've probably never heard of. And then they made Winter Soldier, one of the best, action comic book movies ever. And then they helmed Civil War. And after Joss Whedon and Marvel kind of fell apart, their relationship fell apart, the Russo brothers got the keys to the Avengers Infinity War 1 and 2. They're going to be retitled. We'll talk about that later too. I'm getting ahead of myself because this is all going to be like one topic basically, but there's a lot to discuss about it. But the Russo brothers, what a find. I mean, I was saying this today on Twitter, like 2 years ago, nobody knew who they were. Now you hear Russo brothers, their geek cred is stratospheric. Like there are very few directors, I think, that like hardcore comic book movie fans would want more on a project than the Russo brothers. Now you hear that name, you're like, awesome, this movie's going to be killer. And when I heard that they were going to get Infinity War, I was like, awesome, because I thought Age of Ultron was kind of a drag. I think that a lot of it had to do with the differences of opinion between Joss Whedon and Marvel. I think Joss Whedon works best when he's off doing his own thing. And the Avengers was good. And you know what? Age of Ultron, the parts of it that are clearly sort of Whedon-esque are very good. He's extremely good at writing character dialogue and stuff of that nature. That's really a huge forte of his. In terms of where it all fits into the canon and a lot of the big action set pieces and stuff, I feel like he gets a little bit lost. And, once again, politics and shit aside, forget that for a second. After Age of Ultron, I was like, I don't think this is a good fit. I don't think this is a good fit. I think he should really focus on his own stuff, and I think Marvel should find someone that's that's able to function within that greater MCU and also deliver something that's really slick and really powerful and really fun. And the Russo brothers are that. And the quintessential proof of that is Civil War. They are not one-trick ponies. They're not one-hit wonders, ladies and gentlemen. They know their shit. They put together one of the most impressive comic book movies ever in terms of, the action. Like I said, Winter Soldier combined sort of Bourne sensibilities with Avenger sensibilities. This did that like 10 times over. Like it has, ground level, shaky cam, espionage, bare knuckle fist action alongside, flying around lasers, giant explosions, comic booky, Avengers finale sequence type stuff. And it doesn't clash. It feels very much like it all works together. And another thing we're going to mention a bunch of times this week is going to be Batman v Superman. Now, you heard my Batman v Superman podcast. I did not like Batman v Superman, unfortunately. I mean, I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love / like anything about it. And Batman v Superman and Civil War are very similar in a variety of different ways, but Civil War is almost like the antithesis of Batman v Superman in terms of everywhere that Batman v Superman fails, Civil War shines. More on that in a bit. I'm going to, as you noticed, I'm not in spoilers yet. I'm going to get into spoilers. I might time code this if I see that at the tail end, I go into some more non-spoilery talk, but I'm just going to say a little bit more on it in just very general, broad terms, and then I'm going to just dive into like plot and stuff because that's where I really have the most to say. But this movie was just such a successful piece of cinema. It's a great action movie. It's a great drama. It's a culmination of all of these previous Marvel movies. You know, there's this plot thread that you can follow from the Iron Man movies and the Captain America movies through to the Avengers movies. And those three elements, because Thor doesn't really play into this, obviously, because he's not around. So it's those three, franchises within the MCU that now sort of peak with Civil War and are going to, further peak with the Avengers Infinity War. And whereas, Batman v Superman, which I just mentioned, had to kind of retcon all that stuff and kind of, it had to explain to you the stuff that this movie didn't have to explain to you because it's set up over, a dozen movies, basically. And not a dozen, but you got 3 Iron Mans, you got 2 Captain Americas, you got 2 Avengers, that's like 7 movies. You got a bunch of one-shots, you got some Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you got a lot of that stuff. It's this setup and this payoff. Whereas Batman v Superman had to do both. This is largely just 2.5 hours of payoff. And I say that in a good way, not like, it's just, nerdgasm, action shots. No, there's a lot going on here, and it's done very well, and it's done very interestingly, and it all works really well. So that's generally now I've been watching a lot of reviews and reading a lot of reviews about this, and people try to place this within the, where does this fit for them in terms of their favorite Marvel movies. I think it's way too early for that. It took me a little while to really establish Winter Soldier as a movie that I love so much. I got to watch it a few times. I'm going to watch this again, maybe next weekend or the weekend after. But it had everything that I loved about Winter Soldier was also here. And it had, SpiderMan, and it had Black Panther, and it had, it had a lot of good Iron Man stuff in it, even though it's a Captain America movie. Like, it had all that I wanted and more. So it would be hard. I would be hard pressed to not place this very, very high up in my sort of personal favorites of Marvel movies, of comic book movies in general. So yeah, definitely great. So now I'm gonna transition into spoilers and I'm not gonna just ruin everything, right? But I have to talk specifics. So we're just gonna do that. So let's take a 3-second break to let people hit stop or whatever. Talk some spoilers. Look below in the comments. If it says, skip to time code such and such, then do that. I'm just not sure yet. I'm just pulling this shit out of my ass, I'm not planning anything. So if I do end up talking more non-spoilery stuff, I'll give you a time to skip to. So go watch it. Yeah, go watch it. This movie deserves to do gangbusters. Yeah. All right. So we can get into spoilers a little. So look, briefly, the plot, briefly. We all know from the trailers, right? There's a thing, the Avengers, the new Avengers, right? You got your Scarlet Witch and Falcon and Cap and Black Widow. And they're in Africa. They're doing a mission. And Crossbones shows up with some Hydra people. They're trying to steal some biological weapon. There's a big action-y thing that happens. Crossbones tries to commit suicide, to like suicide bomb himself and Captain America into oblivion, and Scarlet Witch kind of traps his explosion in like a ball of her whatever psychic energy and kind of flings it up into the air and lets it go, because she can't just do that forever, but she flings it up and kind of lets the explosion off right near like a big apartment building, and it just blows the whole building up or whatever, like half of it. And they're all distraught, and a bunch of civilians are killed, including a bunch of people from Wakanda, which is the fictional African country. I believe they're in Nigeria, in Lagos, which is Nigeria, I think. And like in this movie, it's like the neighboring country to Wakanda, which is a very sort of isolationist-y country, but a bunch of Wakandans are there for a thing, and they die. And then there's like a big uproar. And then that kind of fuels that whole Sokovia Accord. Now, in the meantime, Iron Man, Stark, him and Pepper are broken up, and he gets confronted by a woman whose son died in Sokovia, an American woman whose son was like building sustainable housing. He was on vacation from college, like a good kid with like a bright future who went to help some people like on his time off and like ended up dying in Sokovia. And she confronts Stark and says, you murdered my son, blah, blah, blah. So now Stark's on board with the Sokovia Accord thing. So they bring everybody in. They say, look, we can't do this anymore. People are dying. It's the world does not like that you're accountable to no one, and you're this like rogue force, and you could do whatever you want. We want to bring you under like the supervision of the UN. Now Rogers, Captain America, he doesn't like this idea. He was gung-ho, team player, soldier, SHIELD agent, and that blew up in his face. He was betrayed by the people that he swore to serve. He doesn't like this idea. He thinks that he doesn't want to be a slave to geopolitical agendas. He's like, what if we want to go somewhere and they won't let us? Or what if they want to send us somewhere that we don't want to go? Which to me, I think that's a bigger fear for Rogers than the reverse. I think he's more afraid of being used as the strong arm of nefarious interests, as opposed to having to sit on his hands when something is happening. That's also bothersome to him. But to me, the first one of those is more of like a really personal fear of his. And on the other hand, you got Stark, who's now in this sort of introspective phase. Him and Pepper fall apart over this whole bullshit. He feels very guilty. He's trying to atone for a lot of bad things in his past. The movie also shows that he's sort of still struggling with the fact that he was never reconciled with his father before his parents died. He's trying to pick up the pieces of his life. An interesting character arc from Tony Stark in Iron Man and Iron Man 2, this cocksure, playboy, doesn't give a crap about anything, fame whore, just a, playboy, whatever. Now he's this sober, almost shell-shocked, very timid, very concerned, very guilty man, and immediately he and Cap sort of butt heads over this. And different people in the Avengers, they fall on different ends of this. Vision, him and his hyper logic. He thinks Stark has the better idea, and whatever. They, the teams. So, and then just as Rogers is nearly going to be convinced to do this, Agent Carter dies. Now she's an old woman. She dies of old age. and he has to go to her funeral. And at her funeral, Sharon Carter, Agent 13, who's her niece, and he just finds out now that she's her niece, whatever, eulogizes her and says this quote about that her Aunt Peggy told her about, compromise, and you compromise, you don't compromise, whatever. It's this interesting quote, and it's from the comic. Captain America says it in the comic. Here they gave it to Carter, and it really convinces him that there's no way that he can do this. There's no way that he can go along with the Sokovia Accord thing. So he's out, basically. And then they go to sign the Sokovia Accords in Vienna, the UN or whatever, which is where Black Panther enters the picture. Wakandans, as I said, died in the Nigeria operation, and now we're introduced to T'Challa, and who he's the son of the king of Wakanda, and the king's name is, I don't remember, whatever. And then there's a big explosion and people die, including the king of Wakanda, and surveillance footage shows that it was Bucky, the Winter Soldier, who did this. And now shit's on. Because Cap's been searching for Bucky. And now so is everybody else. But whereas Cap wants to figure out what's up, the rest of the world's like, we've had it with this guy. We're done. He has to be taken out. Especially T'Challa, who's now on a revenge mission, and he even says to Black Widow, I'm gonna kill him myself. It's okay. You don't have to go find him. I'm gonna go find him and kill him. And then, from there on, we got this whole race against the clock. You got your Team Cap. They find Bucky. Then they get captured, and then Baron Zemo comes along. He breaks Bucky. I mean, he needs Bucky for something. You know what? I'm not going to just describe this whole plot over and, from beginning to end, but suffice it to say that a Baron Zemo, his sort of ultimate plan was to tear the Avengers apart from within. His family died in Sokovia as well. And he knows that he can't defeat the Avengers. He says this in the end. He says, look, bigger and stronger people than me have tried to destroy them. There's no way I can be able to do that. However, if I can get them to destroy each other, then, that takes care of my problem. And the way he's going to do this is with this. He frames Bucky, basically, causing this rift between Cap and Stark, and then later reveals, one of the big reveals in this movie later on, is that the Winter Soldier killed the Starks, Tony's parents, which is something that not only did Stark not know, Rogers did know, but never told Stark. And that really drives a crazy wedge between them in the end, but that's later on. But yeah, I really liked, there's a sort of a thread that goes through this plot that is sort of repeated, because there's the woman who confronts Stark. First of all, there's Stark and his parents, and Stark's parents are dead. And this is this is baggage that he carries with him in this movie. Then he's confronted by this woman whose son died. And then you got Baron Zemo, whose wife and child died. You got T'Challa, whose father died. And it's all kind of connected. There's this whole notion of loss and how you deal with loss and who you blame for your loss, and what you're going to do about it, how you're going to process this loss. Are you going to go out and try to find the person who did it and kill them? Are you going to try to bring them to justice? Are you able to forgive? Are you even blaming the right person? Etc. And that's what I really liked about this. And I really, really liked that everybody's motivation was very clear, and events came in during the movie that affected the way that people thought and the decisions that they made. And it's kind of amazing that something so fundamental is considered an achievement because of how little it's actually done right. And as I said, there's a bunch of times in this movie where someone is about to change their mind and then something comes along and causes them to take a left turn. Agent Carter's death shifts Captain America. Then later on, he's almost about to sign the Accords again. Then he discovers that Stark has effectively put Scarlet Witch under like house arrest. And then he decides he's going to change his mind. Stark almost comes around to Cap's side, but then War Machine gets injured, and then he finds out that Bucky killed his parents, and then he doesn't even care anymore. Like, it keeps shifting back and forth in a really good way. It's really understandable. The plot progression makes a lot of sense. It's well written. The drama makes sense. It's just joyous in that way. It's not, you know, our mothers have the same name, so let's not punch each other in the face. It's not that. It's not that. Thank God it's not that. And I guess that's all I have to say about that. It's just so great to see a movie where this is done like this, and you're not just expected to believe these motivations without them having been established at all. And not only have we seen these characters evolve over the previous movies, but within this movie as well, they evolve in very clear and understandable and logical ways. So that's about that. Now, some more things worth discussing. Let's go back to Black Panther for a second and T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman. Now, Chadwick Boseman is an actor that I know from the James Brown movie Get On Up. Now, that's a movie that not a lot of people know, which I think is unfortunate. You know how Jamie Foxx gets a lot of credit for playing Ray Charles in the Ray Charles movie. I think Chadwick Boseman deserves every bit of credit for how he plays James Brown in Get On Up. He is unbelievable in that movie. That movie's great, by the way. It's a weird biopic, however you say that. It's not a classic telling of somebody's life story. It's kind of spastic. It has a lot of like fourth wall breaks and weird like sort of dream sequences, and it's great. It has so Chadwick Boseman in it, and the guy from True Blood is in it. What's his name? He plays Lafayette in True Blood. A bunch of others, but Boseman is James Brown. He becomes James Brown in that movie. He's not doing an impression, because often when you place like a historical figure or whatever, you kind of mimic him. This didn't feel like that. It felt like he was James Brown. And when I saw that this was him, I was like, awesome. And you know what? He slays this. So good, so interesting. Just the emotion that he portrays. He's menacing. He's cool. He's really cool. The Black Panther suit and stuff, sure, but I think the casting here was just perfect. And as I said, I'm gonna step outside of my usual box in terms of like talk of like social justice and progressivism and diversity. And I'll say this: I know that there's a lot of people out there who have spent their entire lives basically wanting like a really cool, like black superhero role model. Lots of black comic book fans just really wanted, like a really cool, someone they could look up to, someone who represents them. And boy, are they going to be happy, I think, because it's just killer. He's not he's not he's not a sidekick. He's not a background character. He's this presence. Like, I really, really am excited about the Black Panther movie. I think it's going to be killer. And he's this, he's like part ninja, part sage. He's this really wise, but also really sort of scary dude. And Boseman is just awesome in it. I really wanted more of that. And I know like everybody was so super excited about Spider-Man, and we're going to get to that in just a second. And obviously Spider-Man was great. But I think Black Panther was as cool, like an addition. And this is going to be a really good launch pad for the Black Panther movie that's going to come later. And yeah, I'm just really excited about it. And I'm happy. Like, just like The Force Awakens and also Rogue One are going to give, girls who have been fans of Star Wars forever and just want an awesome, girl character. And now they got that. I don't see anything wrong with that. Look, I know. Let me take a 1 second detour. I know I crow a lot about this stuff like on social media or whatever. But I'm mostly bothered by people who are obnoxious about this and who try to insert it where it just, maybe shouldn't, like maybe not everything has to turn into like a battleground. However, if Star Wars introduces a strong female character, if the Marvel Universe introduces, LGBT characters, different ethnicities or whatever, to make it interesting and diverse, to bring more audiences in. Like I said, if some little girl wants to be Rey, if some kid who, just wanted like a cool black superhero, like has their Black Panther, I think that's awesome. I really do. So I see, not only do I not see anything wrong with it, I think this is really good. And as long as they maintain this level of coolness and make it interesting and make it entertaining, I say, the more the merrier. So yeah, that's about all I got to say about Black Panther. And we can talk a little bit about Spider-Man. Spider-Man was really good. Spider-Man was really, really good. And another thing that I'm now really looking forward to is the Spider-Man Homecoming, which is going to be arriving in 2017. Tom Holland, just an epically pitch perfect Peter Parker. Awkward, sort of starry-eyed, really enthusiastic, like I said, but socially awkward. The Spidey quips, the fact that he's very timid as Peter Parker, but that timidity kind of disappears when he's Spider-Man. Very, very, it's very much the Spider-Man that I know, like from the cartoon or whatever. I'm not a huge like comic booky expert or whatever, but I do know, I have watched a lot of the Spider-Man cartoon from the 90s and stuff. Also prior to that, like the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, all that stuff. This is the kind of Spider-Man I think works the best. I think that the attempts, especially in Amazing Spider-Man, to make him kind of cool really felt off to me. I think Amazing Spider-Man had really good Spider-Man in it. It didn't have really good Peter Parker in it. This feels like it has both, and in a really good way. Marissa Tomei, obviously, unlike Robert Downey Jr., requires no digital de-aging. Still looks just stunning, just unbelievably beautiful woman. I just loved that Spider-Man thing, and in the same way as Black Panther. I really hope the Black Panther movie isn't an origin story, because we basically got the origin story. Black Panther's like, look, Black Panther has protected Wakanda for generations. It's a mantle, passes from warrior to warrior. Now I'm taking it over. Got it. That's your origin story. We don't need a whole movie about that. Just give me a Black Panther movie. Same thing here. It's like Stark shows up at Peter Parker's house. He's like, I know you're Spider-Man or whatever. No, he doesn't say Spider-Man. He's like, I know you're the Spider Kid from YouTube. And we know he's been that way for 6 months. He doesn't say radioactive spider. We know that. He doesn't say Uncle Ben was killed. He doesn't say with great power comes great responsibility, but he does. He says it without saying it, which is just brilliant. That whole monologue he gives where clearly something has happened in his life to give him this drive to help, to be a superhero. He doesn't say what it is though, and he doesn't say that line, but he does. Like I sat there in the theater and I went, with great power comes great responsibility, but he didn't say it. But I still got that. I still got that message from it. It was just awesome. And so, yeah, another thing I'm very, very much excited about now is SpiderMan. Okay. So next up, I guess we can discuss the airport sequence. Oh boy. Okay. Everybody's talking about this airport sequence. And people are saying it's the greatest comic book sequence ever. It's one of the greatest action sequences ever in any movie. And I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to dispute that. Certainly, it was just, I don't know what I can say about this that hasn't been said already. It's between 15 and 17 minutes, I think, of just pure, unadulterated comic book action in all forms. It's this melee, and it's well choreographed. Everybody has their chance to shine. This is true also beyond this one sequence, but in a movie that has like 12 main characters in it, basically, everybody gets a chance to shine. Look, you got Iron Man, and you got War Machine, and you got Vision, and you got Black Widow, and you got Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch and Ant-Man and Spider-Man and Black Widow and Captain America and Falcon. And I think that's all. And they all have good lines, good action things that they do that's very much in their style or whatever. Interesting crossovers, combinations, interesting face-offs, but also interesting, like I said, like collaborations. Everybody gets their moment in the sun, and that's not an easy feat to pull off. This movie's very dense without feeling very dense. It doesn't feel heavy. It doesn't feel ham-handed. It feels fun. It's streamlined. It's very well edited. I think editing is a thing that most people don't notice because it's sort of what they call a pass-through art, kind of like audio post-production. If the audio post-production on a movie is good, you don't notice it. That's the school of thought is you got to make the audio in this movie feel real, and if it feels real, you don't notice that there's audio work being done. You know, Spider-Man does he shoots a little thing, and it makes that noise. Somebody spent hours making that noise and mixing it right and putting it in the right place and making it so that it sounds like that's the noise coming, because there's no noise. It's a CGI thing or whatever, and they don't record. Most people don't know this, but most audio you see in a movie is done later. They record stuff on set mostly for like guide tracks, but like especially sound effects, explosions, and especially little, like all of the little mechanical things on their suits, little piston-y things and stuff, that's all inserted later. Somebody has to sit there and meticulously drop these sounds in and line them up so that when Bucky punches with his metal arm, it goes like, like you hear like the drive of the mechanism in it. It needs to sound like it's coming from that thing. And so if it's done right, you look at the picture and you're like, okay, that thing's making a sound. Now it isn't, but if that's what your brain tells you, that means the job is well done. Same thing goes with editing. If a movie flows well from scene to scene, and if an action sequence is cut well, you don't notice that it's cut or that it's edited. It just looks like people are fighting. And when a shot swings around or when it cuts to the other angle or whatever, if it's not jarring and if it helps make the action clear, your brain doesn't notice that there's cuts going on. On the other hand, like if a scene is badly cut, a lot of like shaky cam, quick cuts, you don't understand what's going on. There's this arms and legs flailing, and then, you got your James Bond or whatever standing over someone and he's passed out and you're like, what just happened? I mean, I get that he beat him, but I didn't see it happen. This isn't like that. And, Batman v Superman, their big fight, and then the fight against Doomsday, it's all like in the dark, in the rain. There's a lot of fog and smoke and fire. Here, the airport sequence is like in the daytime. It's a big outdoor, like, airport hangar. There's nothing in the way. It's just them outside in the sunlight having a big fight. And it's really, like I said, well edited and well cut. The action's really good, and it has a lot of amazingly good quips, not just there, also throughout the movie. A lot of really good little moments. Like I said, Joss Whedon's very good at that stuff. I did not sense his absence. This movie had a Avengers level banter. A lot of huge laughs, but also a lot of little moments that were funny but also had heart. For instance, probably one of my favorite little moments in that entire movie is Captain America and Spider-Man have this big fight, and then at the end, Spider-Man's on the ground, and Captain America says something like, you got a lot of moxie, kid. Where are you from? And Spider-Man says, Queens. And Cap looks at him and kind of smiles and goes, Brooklyn, and kind of walks away. And it's just such a great little moment of like two, because they're fighting, but they're also not fighting. They're not trying to kill each other. There's clearly a split there, but it's not. They're not it's not Batman trying to beat Superman to death with a sink. It's not dour. It's fun. Even when they're fighting each other, it's fun. Like I said in the beginning, you gotta get to the fun. It's got to be entertaining, and you got to leave the theater with a smile. And this obviously isn't universally true. Like, I don't know if people left The Dark Knight with a smile on their face, but Batman v Superman probably shouldn't give you the same kind of emotional impact that The Dark Knight did. I don't know if it should. And because it did have like little quips and stuff, it kind of tried to do both, but it was way too heavy on the whereas this did both, but everything was fun. Even the drama was fun, and the little, like I said, lines between. You got your Falcon and Bucky who have like a little bit of like, they kind of snipe at each other, and it's always funny. And there's a couple of really charming scenes between Scarlet Witch and Vision, which I gather are an item in the comic world, and they're, I guess, hinting that it's kind of going in that direction. They didn't really go there, but they did without. This movie also has a lot of that. A lot of like little, like I said, in the Spider-Man sequence where he gives you all the Spider-Man info that you know without ever saying any of it. Without saying, I was bitten by a radioactive spider. Without saying, my uncle died and it was my fault. You don't hear that, but you see it in his face. And because all of us know Spider-Man, nobody doesn't know the origin story of fucking Spider-Man at this point. They didn't need to tell you this. That's smart. That's not spoon feeding you shit that you already know. And there's a level. This might sound a little like douchey, but like it's almost like they respect the audience. They're like, we know that you know. We don't have to tell you this. You know. So we're gonna give you that emotion without just coming right out and going like, Uncle Ben there was a mugger and he ran past him. Yes. I know. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to touch on specifically. A lot of people complained about Baron Zemo and about how Marvel movies never have a good villain. I actually found, I thought it was going to be worse because of that negative hype about it. When I went in, I was like, okay, just prepare yourself for a bad villain. And by the end, it was like, he wasn't central to the plot, but he had an understandable motivation. His plot made sense. Like I said, he said, like, look, I'm not a supervillain. I can't kill Iron Man and Captain America. Like, I'm not, like, Ultron couldn't do that. And I'm not an AI that has like millions of robot drones or whatever. I can't do that. But you know who can kill Captain America and Iron Man? Captain America and Iron Man. So I'm going to just do that. I'm going to manipulate them. That's something that I can do. I can manipulate them into hating each other, which is basically what Batman v Superman tried to do with Lex Luthor and failed miserably. Here, I wouldn't say worked marvelously. The plan was still a little convoluted. It was still a little convenient, but I don't mind as much because this isn't a Bourne movie. This isn't even a Bond movie. It doesn't really have to make as much sense in that way. Because people said like, well, how did he know that both Captain America and Iron Man would end up at that facility so that he could show them the video at the same time and get them to fight? True. That's true. But you know what? Who cares? The reason that the confrontation happened there was for artistic license. Could have been somewhere else. He could have just played that video on the screen at the Shield place in Germany. But then the movie would have been over then. That was done for creative license. The point was, the important thing to take away is his plan was to get them to fight each other. And he did. He won. Interestingly enough, I guess Kevin Feige's favorite movie ever is Empire Strikes Back. And this movie is very much Empire Strikes Back. I got to thank my friend Piggy Bank who made this observation. This movie is very Empire Strikes Back because it ends with the good guys losing. Baron Zemo won in the end. The Avengers are fractured. Half of them are in prison. War Machine is paralyzed, and like there is no Avengers anymore. He won. He's in prison now. He was going to kill himself, but Black Panther stopped him. But he ended up on top. Like, his plan worked. I mean, they didn't kill each other, but they might as well have almost. And also there was an Empire Strikes Back reference, which I thought was one of my favorite little things in the movie too, because Spider-Man wants to take down Giant Man, and he says, let's Empire Strikes Back this. I'll rope his legs around, make him fall down like one of those things on Hoth. That was great. I was like, it's finally people are referencing that movie, like actually referencing it in a movie. How weird is it that they're referencing Star Wars in a Marvel movie? Like, I don't know. I never thought I'd hear Spider-Man talk about Star Wars, but there you go. So I guess that's about it. I mean, it's just fun, guys and gals. It's fun. And it's fun without just being silly and comic-y and slapsticky. It's a serious movie with a lot of drama and a lot of serious emotions that's still fun throughout. And I cannot wait for Black Panther, and I cannot wait for Spider-Man, and I especially can't wait for Infinity War. Now, I said before I was going to touch on this. Apparently, the Infinity War movies are being retitled because right now they're called Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2. And apparently the Russo brothers have said, look, these movies are two very different animals, and they're not calling them part one and part two is just not going to work. We're going to just give them individual titles. And I've seen some theories about what those are going to be. Maybe the Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War. In any case, I think that's really good because I think they're trying to avoid Harry Potter / Hunger Games syndrome. Because when I heard Infinity War 1 and 2, I was like, okay, so they got an Infinity War story and they want to break it up into two movies because, you know, they milk this stuff now. But they're like, no, you don't get it. That's not what we're doing at all. These are actually two movies that we're making. And here's the proof is we're actually going to give them individual titles and they're just going to be Avengers 3 and 4, basically. Now they're being filmed together and they're essentially part of the same bigger story, but they're not gonna, I don't think they want to make it feel like it's like a, you know, half a story cut, watch the next half next year. It's like, this is a 2-movie event, but each of them I think is still going to kind of stand on its own. And that's awesome. Like I said, Russo brothers, they've shown that they really, really understand this stuff on a really deep level. And I think that now that Marvel had the reshuffling and Ike Perlmutter is no longer, you know, the head honcho with regards to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you got Kevin Feige now and the Russo brothers. I think that's such a strong creative force behind this whole universe that I couldn't be more excited. I'm even excited about Thor Ragnarok, even though I was not a huge fan of the Thor movies. And, you know, Captain Marvel, which is going to come out, and Guardians 2, obviously. Like, I'm really, really psyched about this universe. And, you know, I want to see what happens. It's going to be fun. So I think on that note, I'm probably gonna wrap up for this week. Probably gonna come back next week with another show. I don't know what I'm gonna talk about yet. I might do a little like half season review of the anime that I spoke about that I was gonna watch this season. Watching a lot of good anime this season. There's a lot of pretty good shows and I think maybe I could touch on a few of them. I might do something about books. A book I've been waiting for a few years is finally coming out this week or next week. City of Mirrors by Justin Cronin, which is the final book in the Passage trilogy, which is just The Passage by Justin Cronin. If you want a really good book, if you liked The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand, go out and pick up a copy of The Passage by Justin Cronin and its sequel, The 12. Really, really cool post-apocalyptic novels. Another one also, by the way, Swan Song by Robert McCammon. To me, those three, The Stand, Swan Song, The Passage, just a trio of really, really good end-of-the-world stories. And I would read those anytime. And I don't know, I might talk about that. We'll see. I'm probably just going to start it. I'm reading something else right now. When I'm done with that, I'm going to switch over to City of Mirrors, which is the finale. And then, I don't know, maybe talk a little about that series or maybe recommend some more books. I don't know. We'll see what happens. So yeah, I am at Neon Taster on Twitter, and the podcast Twitter account is at Neoncast. You can tweet me comments, questions, stuff of that nature. You can also email the podcast at neoncastpod@gmail.com. Check me out on YouTube and all that stuff. And yeah, so thanks for listening if you have been listening. And if not, then why am I talking to you?